Morrison. I am the founder of College Loan Freedom, and I am a student loan debt expert. I teach financial advisors and mortgage brokers all over the country, and now graduate students, about student loan debt, and specifically kind of how to avoid the traps. Welcome, welcome. Come on in. Just getting rolling. How to avoid the traps that are associated with the debt. So I've put in, why you should listen to me is because I've put in probably, 15,000 hours over the last 6 years helping people with their student loans, how to navigate the system, how to get the most amount of money saved. So I always look at student loan debt through the lens of how do we save the most money. So that's what we're going to talk about here today, and avoiding the traps of where the vacuum of debt can suck money from your pocket and just go into a black hole, right? So I've custom tailored this talk. I think we have an hour, but it seems pretty loose. So I've custom tailored about 40 minutes. I'll just talk at you, get familiar with all the programs and all that kind of stuff, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, okay? I want you guys to leave here with a plan of action, a plan of attack. A lot of people, a lot of student loan borrowers, what they do is they treat it like ostriches with their head in the sand, and they just ignore it and hope it goes away. I don't want you guys to have that problem. I want you to leave here with tangible, real-world plans so that we take away the fear and the worry about the debt, okay? So we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, just write them down. If I don't cover it all, we'll just go into it at the end, okay? I'm going to give you a little bit of a history, just to give kind of some context to the solutions that came about through the U.S. government with all these problems. Brief history lesson. We're going to talk a lot about repayment options and plans to go along with that. We're going to talk a lot about the traps or the pitfalls that a lot of people fall into when it comes to student loans. And then we'll talk a little bit about credit, because I always get those questions. A little about mortgages, because I always get those questions too. And we can't not talk about politics, unfortunately. Fun times. A lot of talk about student loans in the political arena today. Okay, let me dive right in here with a brief history lesson. So today, if you guys didn't know, the student loan debt stands at $1.5 trillion worth of debt spread over 44 million Americans, which is a fancy way of basically saying that 1 in 3 working adults are going to have student loans. So you're not alone, right? How we got to 1.5 trillion, because in 2007, it was only $300 billion of debt. I say only like it's a small number. But it's ballooned up 500% in the last 12 years. And so how did that happen? Well, the student loan debt crisis, or bubble, or whatever you want to call it, is really a ripple effect from the mortgage crisis. So before 2007, before the mortgage crash, we had the states who collect money in property taxes would subsidize the colleges and suppress tuitions to keep tuitions low, which would attract students into their states who would become residents and put money in the local economy, and then eventually buy property to put money back in the state. So it was a nice little ecosystem we had here. Well, when the mortgage crash happened, the first thing that the states started to do was slash their budgets, and they slashed the subsidies that went to the colleges, okay? But the colleges, they didn't want, welcome. The colleges we're just getting started, so you're not missing a whole lot. The colleges didn't want to slash their budgets, so what they did was they shifted how they got their income from the states to in the form of higher tuitions, to put it onto the college graduate, right? And in upwards of 300% in some cases. And since 2007, college tuition pricing has gone up on average of 7 to 9% each year, constantly outpacing inflation. And even though property values have come back to where they were before the crash, the states still haven't put back the subsidies to keep tuitions low. So now it's basically falling on you guys and the other 44 million graduates. Okay, so we had a lot of people going to school at the same time that tuitions had spiked. since the early 1900s, every time we have a recession or a crash or whatever you want to call it, people go back to school in droves because they want to re-educate. They want to get into new fields, get into places with more opportunity, right? And some of them just survive on student loans just to keep food on their table, right? So we had a huge number of people coming back to school at the same time as tuitions had spiked. And then we also had a huge number of people coming to school in the form of the millennial generation, right? So it's now bigger than the baby boomers. They're coming to school at the same time tuitions have gone up. In our society, we still put it on to the parents to pay for colleges. And what was happening before the crash was that a lot of parents would pull equity from their homes to pay for their kids' college. But since the mortgage crash, all that equity dried up, so that loophole was gone. So it doesn't take a financial genius to see that if the cost of something keeps going up, way outpacing inflation, but the way we pay for it doesn't keep pace, we're going to have a large number of people leaning on student loans, right? And again, $1.5 trillion. That's just a brief history lesson because all the solutions I'm going to talk about, most of them, were born out of this problem starting in 2007. So the government saw this coming and they started to put plans in place. Of course, they didn't tell the American public, which is why I'm here talking to you. Okay, so now we're going to talk about repayment. Repayment plans. It's a simple graph, payment over time. Okay. Repayment options. There's basically two schools of thought when it comes to how to repay a student loan debt. And there's tons of strategies everywhere online, yada yada, gurus who talk about it, but it all boils down to two basic concepts. One that I have deemed path A, and then the other one path B. Path A is what I call, in a perfect world, this is what would happen. And path B is outside the box thinking. This is what I use a lot with clients. Now, you'll understand this will come more and more clear as I go on, but the real break point is roughly about $50,000. Meaning that if you have under $50,000, path A is probably what you're going to choose, maybe. If you have over $50,000 worth of student loan debt, then path B is definitely probably what we're going to look at, okay? I'm not going to ask, it's not my business, but this is how I usually determine how to go. Now, it doesn't mean that I've had people have over $50,000 that have chosen path A and vice versa. But path A basically is this. The people who want to pay off their debt as fast as humanly possible. We hear that all the time. Everybody wants to get out of debt fast. And I'll show you what's happening in our economy today. Right now, we have a 30% drop in the millennial generation of people who want to become entrepreneurs because they want to go down path A and pay off their debt faster before they take the leap into entrepreneurship. We have a mortgage shift from people are waiting to buy homes. It's going from early 30s to late 30s because people want to get out of student loan debt. They want to pay off their student loan debt before they get into a mortgage. There are tons of studies that say that people are waiting to get into relationships, waiting to get married until they get their student loans paid off. Even they don't even want to get into a relationship if somebody has a high amount of debt. And we're waiting to start families until we get our student loans paid off. It's causing a lot of problems around our economy. Namely, another factor is this. If you're taking notes or you're just going to watch this video later, $1 for every $1 of student loan debt that someone has, it's a lost $10 in retirement savings. So the average student loan that someone leaves with, a graduate student, is $40,000. So that means, on average, people are missing about $400,000 in their retirement savings if they graduate with student debt. Does everybody get that? Meaning that, which is why I talk so much to financial advisors across the country, because they're very interested in this. How do we fix that? Meaning that if we have $1.5 trillion as a nation of student debt, we're missing about $15 trillion in retirement. That's going to have a huge effect in the next 20, 30 years, okay? Not trying to scare you, I'm just giving you the reality of it, all right? So this is path A, the people that want to pay this thing off the fastest as humanly possible, all right? So, I'm going to give you some hypothetical examples to kind of flesh this out, to kind of clear it up. If someone leaves school, and we'll just keep it at the 50, if someone leaves school with $50,000 worth of student loan debt, their monthly bill is going to be about $500 a month. Everybody who leaves school, including everybody in this room who has student debt, is going to be placed into what's called the standard repayment plan. Standard meaning it's what everybody gets. It's a 10-year plan, so it's 120 monthly payments divided by what you owe plus interest. Comes out to roughly 1% of what you owe. So if you owe 50 grand, your payments for 10 years are going to be about $500 a month. If you owe 20 grand, it's going to be about $200 a month. If you owe 100,000, it's going to be about $1,000 a month. Is everybody clear on that? Okay, so this is what Path A looks like. For somebody who has $50,000 worth of debt, they graduate, they leave school, they get their 6-month grace period. For those of you who don't know, you get 6 months in order to find a job so that you can pay back this loan. Which, I don't know why they chose 6 months, don't ask me that. But, so you get your first student loan bill 6 months after leaving, and it's going to be about 1% of what you owe. If you never miss a payment, you're just going to pay every single month that 1% until it's paid off in 10 years. This is Path A. It works fine if you never miss a payment. I'm going to harp on that a lot. So it works fine if you never miss a payment. Or if you're one of these people that's super aggressive with your payments. Let's say you are someone who wants to get this done faster than 10 years so that you can go start living your life. So let's say you pay twice as much. You're going to pay double payments, $1,000 a month. And if these numbers sound crazy, it's just hypothetical. So like $1,000 a month for a student loan. It happens a lot more than you think. Okay, so let's say you're paying $1,000 a month to try to get this done in 5 years. So here's the first trap that people fall into. If you pay extra on your student loans, the student loan servicing company doesn't take that extra money and just automatically put it towards your debt. They will move your due date out in order to keep collecting interest. You have to physically call them and tell them to put the excess money toward the loan. So in the mortgage industry, brief detour, in the mortgage industry, people move or refinance their homes every 7 years. Well, the bankers figured that out. So what they do is they collect mostly interest in the first 7 years, so that when you refinance or move, they get all of their profit and the principal remains the same. So student loans are very, very similar in that when you start paying this, if you're just doing a 10-year program, you start paying this, the first 5 years is going to be mostly interest because they're waiting for you to make a mistake. Okay, so that's Path A. You pay it off as fast as possible by never missing a payment, or you pay extra to try to cut this 10 years in half. Does everybody get that? So here's the trap. Here's where 80% of the 44 million borrowers are falling into this trap. They've got put into Path A because everybody thinks that they want to pay this thing off as fast as possible. But then things happen. So let's say, we'll keep with the same hypothetical. Let's say you're one of these people and you're like, I sat through Larry's thing and it's going to be awesome. I'm going to pay this thing off in 5 years instead of 10. I'm sorry, I'm going to pay this thing off in 10 years, never going to miss a payment. Let's say you're 5 years in, halfway to your goal, but then life happens, right? Maybe, heaven forbid, you get a car accident or a medical bill or some family trouble. Or maybe you can't find a job in the field that you're studying for. Or maybe you get into that job and they're not paying as much. Maybe you got to take it in Albuquerque, New Mexico or something, and they're just not paying you as much. So across the country, what happens? They just did a study in the Wall Street Journal beginning of last year. And they said that across the country, when people run into financial trouble, the first thing they do is stop paying their student loan. Because consciously or subconsciously, we all understand that you can't repossess an education, right? So money goes toward food, clothing, and shelter first, rather than toward the student loan. It gets put on the back burner. So let's say that's you. You run into financial troubles. And you call the servicing company. By the way, the servicing company, if you didn't know, is just a company that's hired by the Department of Education to take care of your payments and send you bills and do all that stuff. They don't do that themselves. It's not like the IRS who deals with the Treasury. So they have companies that do it for you. So you call the servicing company who handles it, and you say, I'm in financial trouble, I need help. They're going to put you into what's called forbearance or deferment. you're taking notes, forbearance or deferment, these are scams being perpetrated on the American public today. First of all, real quick, this is all my opinion. I don't want to get sued even though I'm documenting this. Everything I'm expressing is my opinion from being in this industry for so long, okay? But in my opinion, deferment and forbearance are scams being perpetrated on the American public for this reason. Student loan debt interest is the most aggressive interest in the financial world. It also has the ability to compound. What that means is, it's calculated on what's called simplified daily interest, which is just a fancy term that they've put on the most aggressive algorithm that's running behind the scenes. So again, let's bring it back to the real world. So $500 a month you've been paying for 5 years, you're halfway to your goal of paying this off. You go on a break for 1 year. When you come back and start paying again, it's like you've only been paying for 2 years, not 5. That's how much gets recouped in student loan debt compounding interest. So this is what's happening to people. This is the trap that I'm here to talk to you about avoiding. So people pay and they pay and they pay. They take a break when finances get tough. They pay, and they pay, and they pay, and they do this until they die. Or they give up. Right now, student loan debt is the most toxic asset in our country, meaning it has the highest delinquency and default rate. Just studies released this month that say 43% of all student loan borrowers are either in delinquency or default, what they call distress. They're behind on payments, they're having trouble. And this is the treadmill, this is the trap that we are going to avoid here today. I'm going to give you a very extreme example of this. I have a client, her name is Davis, very sweet lady. She graduated college in 1996 with $60,000 worth of debt. This was her life. She paid right out of school, but then life happened. She got a divorce, she became a single mother of 3, she had to move around a lot, she changed jobs, she became an entrepreneur, had to get that off the ground. But bottom line is, she paid when she could, and she didn't pay when she couldn't. And today, her loan stands at $320,000, an original $60,000 loan. She's probably paid over the last 23 years that 60 grand that she borrowed. But because of student loan debt compounding interest and this trap, she owes $320. Now luckily she knows me and met me 3 years ago, so I'm gonna make sure she doesn't pay, hopefully any more of that. But, and I'll get everybody in this room a book. But for the book, I had to do a ton of research. I mean, I also hired people to help me, but I did a lot of it myself. And what I found was that crazy high number, $1.5 trillion worth of debt, we've only lent about 1 to 1.1 trillion, meaning almost $500 billion or $500 billion is all interest. This is what's happening. This is the fate that we want you to avoid. Does everybody understand that so far? Okay, super dangerous. All right. If I've scared you thoroughly enough, let's move on. So how do we then avoid this trap? Well, we can look at PathBe. PathBe is what I call the outside-the-box thinking. It's using the existing government programs. Now, I should have just kept that up there. But this crazy treadmill of debt until you die, the government knows this exists. They made this. They understand the pitfalls. So they started in 2007 to make solutions. So if you're taking notes, one of the biggest solutions is called income-driven repayment. Income-driven repayment. Very, very powerful tool when you know how to use it. It's basically a payment plan based on your income, right? Makes sense? But the beauty of it is you can't find it anywhere else in the world of finance. I can't go get a mortgage or a car or a credit card and tell them, look, I want a payment based on my income. And if my income drops, I want the payment to drop so I don't lose the house or the car or the default on the card, right? It doesn't happen that way. It's a flat payment until the debt's paid off. So income-driven repayment is a very, very powerful tool. The second one is student loan forgiveness. Okay, student loan forgiveness is getting a lot of bad press, and for good reason, but it is real. I come across this all the time. It is real. It's in the College Cost Reduction and Access Act of 2007, which you can research. It's been added on to over the years, and it's also in the promissory note of every single federal student loan borrower. Meaning, if you have a federal student loan, in the terms of your agreement, it'll spell out forgiveness And it is guaranteed to you if you go through all the hoops to get it, okay? I say all that because both of these solutions sound too good to be true. You know, when I talk to people like, you know, we can get your payment on income-driven repayment, we can lower the payment, we can set it up for forgiveness, blah, blah, blah. They're like, that can't be real. I have to think about it. Because you don't find it anywhere else, right? But it is real, and we use it all the time. So, student loan forgiveness is not what most people think. Most people think, you know, we just fill out some paperwork and the debt goes away. If that was the case, I'd be a millionaire many times over, right? That's not how it works. Imagine that you lent a good friend of yours some money, and they were paying you back diligently month after month, and you said, you know what, you've been doing such a great job toward the end of the loan. You're like, don't worry about the rest, we're even, we're square, it's forgiven. That's how forgiveness works. It's a timeline or a clock. And no matter how much time, no matter how much you pay while the clock is running, and no matter how much is left over when the clock runs out, the rest is completely forgiven by the government. So there are 6 different federal forgiveness programs. And the only difference between all of them is the time that's on the clock. So for instance, if you're permanently disabled, or you were defrauded by your school, which I'm sure nobody was here, you get your loans forgiven right away. No waiting, no clock. If you're a teacher or planning to go into teaching, after 5 years of teaching, you get partial forgiveness of your student loans after 5 years. If you go into the government sector or nonprofit, you get your loans forgiven after 10 years. This is the most popular one or most well-known. It's called public service loan forgiveness. So I sat through, I came and saw a workshop here to kind of prepare for this one last week, and it was about graduates who wanted to get into the university system, become researchers and become professors. So if that's you, definitely want to take advantage, or a social worker or anything, definitely want to take advantage of the 10-year public service. And then after Obama came in 2009, he expanded this program to have forgiveness for everybody else who didn't fall into these categories after 20 or 25 years, depending on the ages of the loans. Most people in here are probably going to fall in here to the 20-year plan because you have to have really old loans to have to wait 25 years. Excuse me. So that's forgiveness. Now let's look at how this plays out rather than this crazy treadmill of scariness, all right? So let's say you choose PathBe after listening to me and you leave school wanting to get into these programs. So the first thing you're going to do is figure out which one of these plans you fall into. Let's just use the hypothetical that you qualify for the 20-year forgiveness plan. Does this one work? Yes, I'll just keep it with black. Black works. Okay. So let's say you choose the 20-year forgiveness plan. That's the one you qualify for. So what that means is, after 20 years, no matter what happens in your life, ups and downs, craziness, whatever, after 20 years, the loan is gone. It's done. The weight is off of your back. Okay? Forgiveness is what I call the light at the end of the tunnel, so that you will never fall into this trap of just paying it until you die. There's going to be a moratorium or an end date. So the first thing you do is you set up a forgiveness plan, and then you tie your payment to your income. Now, if you're leaving school, you're probably not going to have a job right away. If you do it right when you leave, I don't know everybody's situation, of course, but let's say you don't have a job right away, you get yourself into these programs. So your payment would effectively start at 0 instead of the 1%. So then, hypothetically, of course, this is what's going to happen. You're going to keep it low until you start making money, and because the payment is tied to your income, it's going to fluctuate, maybe go up, maybe it's going to go down if you get married or have kids. Maybe you change jobs, so it fluctuates or whatever. And then hopefully toward the end of this 20-year cycle, you can finally afford your crazy high student loan payment. Because the 10-year standard payment that everybody gets right out of school is the highest you'll ever have to pay. Don't ask me why they give you the highest one right out. It's a whole debate for another time. But basically, what I'm showing you here is that we want to save everything but black. Okay, let me see if I have... Nope. All right. It's going to be a lot of black on this marker. Does that one work? What is the screen? Cool. All right. Thank you, brother. So what we're doing is saving all of this money right here and letting the forgiveness kick in on the rest of the debt. Does everybody see that? Okay. So the idea here And the reason I gave you the history lesson, what the government is essentially saying, I sit through a lot of seminars. I just sat through one about taxes, and when you talk to tax professionals, they can see what the IRS's intention is. Well, I see this whole thing so big that I can see what the Department of Education's intention is, or at least who made these programs. What they're saying to you through these programs is this. We're not saying, and I'm not a proponent of don't pay your loans, which would be awesome, but no, I'm not saying don't pay what you borrow, because that's a big, debate. But what I am saying is these programs are set up to pay what you can afford to pay. And if you pay what you can afford to pay, if you give them a portion of your income for a large chunk of your working life, they're going to write off the rest. Okay? So what that means is, if the education was overpriced and didn't give you the value in our society value is judged on how much we make in income. That's just how it is. So if the education was overpriced and it didn't give you the income to pay off the loan, they're going to cover the rest. Okay, that's what this whole system means, and that's why I say this: if you have under $50,000 of debt, let's say you have 20 grand worth of debt, the payment's only going to be $200. This might not work for you because maybe you're $200 a month and your income is like 60, 70, 80. This isn't going to work. But if you have a large amount of debt, maybe you got a doctorate and it's 100 grand and you're only going to be making 60, 70, then you have to start looking at this program. Does that make sense? Let me give you some real world examples to kind of show you, concretely what I'm talking about. Okay, so I have a client. Her name is Katie. She is a teacher in Southern California, and I use her because she is almost exactly the hypothetical. So she came to me with $55,000 worth of debt, and she was paying $550 a month. So the first thing we did was we set her up in the 10-year forgiveness plan because she works for the government. She's a school teacher. Those of you who don't know, I don't know why I have this debate with people, but school is government, public schools. So we set her up in the 10-year forgiveness plan, and we're able, because of her income, to lower her payment down to $175 a month. And she's pretty much capped out on her income. She's whatever you want to call tenured or whatever. So she's probably only going to pay $175 a month, unless something drastic happens in life, for the next 10 years. So basically she's going to pay about $20,000 of her student loans, and $35,000 will be forgiven by the government. Does everybody see that? Okay, I'll give you another example. So remember Davis, the one with my scary extreme story. So she came to me 3 years ago. Her debt was only $260. I say only. She tried to get into these programs herself, which is possible with my help or the book. The government wanted $1,000 a month. Because she's a small business owner, we were able to lower it down to, I think it was like $20 a month. And because her loans are super old, we're setting her up in the 25-year forgiveness plan. But she's the one who paid the 60 grand that she originally borrowed, and now the government wants, $500,000 almost. So basically she's gonna pay, as long as she's a small business owner, nothing crazy happens in her life, I'm gonna make sure her payments are extremely low and then let the government forgive the rest. Does everybody see that? Okay. So this is Path A and Path B. This is why I say the $50,000 is the break point. Because a lot of people are gonna have a lot of trouble trying to pay off 60, 70, 80, couple hundred grand worth of debt in 10 years, all right? Okay, we're rocking right along. We're almost to questions, so hopefully you've got some ready for me. So we went through HIST, went through repayments, we saw the trap of Path A, credit, mortgages. A lot of people ask me, almost like clockwork, every time I explain Path B and all that, repayments through income-driven repayment and forgiveness, does it affect your credit? No. Even if your payments are $0, it'll still show on your credit report that it's on time, so it won't affect your credit. Politics, the fun stuff. Okay. So, right now, we have a president. I'm not going to get political, like who to vote for, because that's not who I am. But bottom line is our current president said a lot of things on the campaign trail that I would have loved to see happen. When it comes to student loans, didn't happen. Our current education secretary is hell-bent on taking away all of your rights as borrowers and getting rid of all these programs. That's just how it is. So I doubt we'll see anything change in these programs or anything like that in the near future. Then we have Bernie, right? I mean, Elizabeth Sanders, or Elizabeth Warren's program, I've read it. It's okay. It could work. It's all right. But the real thing we got to talk about is Bernie Sanders. So he wants to forgive all the debt, all student loans. And I'm all for it, sort of. So what I mean by that is, first of all, people think that if they forgive all the debt, I'll be out of a job. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. If this problem gets solved, I'll solve another problem and be fine. It would be a huge boost to our economy, though, if all the student loan debt was forgiven, with so much money freed up to solve all those other problems. We talked about, with retirement and entrepreneurship and home ownership and families. It would be amazing. Obviously, there's got to be a lot of things that have to get Sanders in the White House, right? He's got to, become the Democratic primary and then get in and then actually forgive the debt, which is a whole other animal. But let's say it happens. I'm okay with it on one point. The student loan debt $1.5 trillion problem is a symptom of a much larger issue. And getting rid of all the debt is kind of like, and not to be gross, it's kind of like cutting out a tumor and expecting the cancer to die. That may or may not work. But this symptom, the $1.5 trillion, is because of the problem that we have with education. Education is not as efficient as it could be. Right now, 73% of all college graduates do not go in the field that they study for. I don't want to be like the bearer of bad news, but some people in this room might not go into the field that you're studying for, just FYI. And as my business partner would say, the system is set up right now, it's a working system, not a perfect system. We're not pricing the education per the industry. So what I mean by that is, an engineering student who might be in high demand and get paid a lot of money after leaving school has to pay the same tuition as an art student who might not be in high demand, who might not get paid a lot. They still have the same amount of debt, okay? Plus, we have the problem of, well, I don't want to go, that's too much of a tangent. Okay, so bottom line is, our education system is not fixed, but by cutting out the debt, I don't think we'll fix the problem. So I would love to see all the debt forgiven. That would be amazing. I just don't know if it's also going to be predicated on fixing the efficiency of our education system. Does that make sense? All right, we made it through me yapping at you. What questions do you have about Path A, Path B, and I'll stick around and all that kind of stuff if anybody has any other stuff that we don't cover. So what questions come up when I talk about debt and politics? All right, at the door, hello.
I have one weird one, maybe like a little dream. So you mentioned paying it off in 5 years instead of 10.
Uh-huh.
Can you do 5 years and then do the income, is it income driven?
Okay, I'm with you. Okay, so yeah, let me go back to Path A and Path B. So I want you guys to leave here with a path chosen, but it doesn't mean you can't switch, right? Let me give you an example. So I have a client who just came to me, I think last week. No, yeah, anyway, it doesn't matter. So he's an accounting student, he just left school, and he only owes $22,000. So his payment was $220 a month, but he hasn't found a job in his field of study. He's a bartender, and his field of study is accounting. So we set him up in a $0 payment. We set him up in a 20-year forgiveness plan, which is Path B, income-driven repayment and forgiveness. But he's not gonna probably ever see forgiveness. In the next 3 years, 2 to 3 years, he's probably gonna get a job, and then a good job, accounting job, and then his payments will increase, and he'll probably pay off the loan. But you can use it as a buffer, kind of buy yourself time, right? And then if let's say, to go to your point, you're in Path A and you're like wanting to get this thing paid off, but then something happens. Of course, you can change into the income-driven plan. It's a safety net, and it still obviously depends on everybody's situation is unique. Everybody's career they're going into is unique. Everybody's amount of student debt is going to be different, and income. But the beauty of this, at least PathBe, is that it'll mold to whatever life happens. Does that answer your question? Okay, good question.
Can you touch bases a little bit about the consolidation process if the loans exceed over, my goodness, 100 grand?
Sure, okay, yeah. The question was, can I touch on consolidation? So consolidation is simply a tool, and when you know how to use it, it's just like any other tool. It does have its consequences. If you're going into the public sector, or if you have Parent Plus loans, or anything like that. But for the most part, it's basically a consolidation is just many into one. Now there's some thing I need to touch on with that, and I'm glad you brought it up. This whole thing is the federal system. So private student loans constitute about 10% of the overall debt load. So when you're talking to a financial expert in the industry, consolidation is a term reserved for the federal system, and refinance is a term reserved for the private system. They both do the exact same thing, but just to keep them separate, that's what we do. So a consolidation, as long as it's all federal, you want to keep it all federal. I never tell people to turn a federal student loan into a private student loan because PathBe goes away. If you refinance it, you go with SoFi, you get hooked into all those fancy commercials or whatever, all PathBe goes away and now you're stuck with only paying it off. But with consolidation, if you do it right when you leave school, you can do it on studentloans.gov. I walk through how to do it in the book. It's fairly simple, especially if you do it like right within your first 6 months grace period. You just go on studentloans.gov, you fill out the information. It should be fairly simple, and in there it'll also ask you the consolidation application and the income-driven repayment application are intermingled. So it'll ask you about your income and that kind of a thing. But yeah, it's pretty much all fairly simple at studentloans.gov. I would recommend to do it probably right when you leave school, just so you have a fresh, clean slate to start with. Again, not knowing your situation. Okay.
No, because supposedly I am supposed to be like in the public school system, but I kind of went that route where I'm more business owner types. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I mean, I'm teaching, but more as an independent contractor now because I was in the public school system. I experienced issues when I was within the public school system and with the administrators.
Okay.
So now I'm kind of like.
All right. So I don't know if this is where you're leading, but so public service loan forgiveness gets a lot of bad rap, and it's because with all of these programs, especially this one, the government is essentially giving away free money. And of course, if they're giving away free money, they're going to make us jump through a ton of hoops in order to get that money. And the biggest, not problem, a lot of problems that are arising is because people didn't know the hoops. They don't know the hoops. This one came out in 2007, which means the first people to apply for it were 2017. And the government didn't tell people about all the hoops till 2012. So that means for the next 5 years, you're going to see a lot of bad press about public service loan forgiveness because not a lot of people know how to get all their time counted and all of that. The other thing is this. Going to the Department of Education or the student loan servicing company and asking them how to save the most money on your student loans is kind of like going to the IRS and asking them how to save the most money on your taxes. It's not in their best interest to tell you all of this stuff that I'm telling you, which is why I named the book Secrets. Bottom line is, right now, the government makes $2 billion a month in profit from student loans. It's the biggest asset in our asset column right now, which is why when I talk about Bernie, it's like, it's going to be hard to take that one off the books. But all that said is, if you use my help or use the book, you can get this. Also with small business owners, I didn't touch on this. I touched on it a little bit with Davis's situation. But small business owners, remember I was talking about the taxes, and when you see it from a macro view, you can see what they're trying to do. With the same thing with student loans and taxes, it's set up for the small business owner, meaning that you can use income-driven repayment through the business and write off all the expenses. so that you can keep your payment low as a small business owner until your business takes off, basically. Okay. Any other questions? Good stuff. Yes.
I come late.
You came super late, Brenda. Can you help me out pass out books to anybody who's not one?
Yeah. Can you explain the PathBe and PathBe?
Sure, but it is basically Path A is you want to pay it off fast or in a timely manner, and Path B is you're going to pay what you can afford until it's forgiven or it's paid off. And Path A is your Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman's, the financial gurus tell you to get out of debt the fastest. That's Path A. It works just fine if you never miss a payment. But Path B, the outside the box, alternative, radical, crazy guy like me, I'm like, why don't we pay as little as possible until either it's forgiven or we can afford to pay what they want. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Okay.
I got one.
Okay. This is a plant. Okay, what's up?
So if I consolidate my loans after 5 years on the standard plan, am I starting a new 10-year loan or do I just have 5 years left?
Okay, that's another trap. But so remember, I said consolidation is a tool. You just you have to know how to use it. That's all. If you consolidate all your student loans and you don't choose a repayment plan, the income one, they will put you in most likely a 25 or 30-year plan for a standard payment. So instead of 10 years, instead of a 10-year flat payment where you never want to miss one, it'll now be like 25 or 30 years. So again, use the book or contact us, but just know that when you're consolidating your loans, you want to choose a repayment plan that works best for you, either Path A or Path B. Otherwise, they will choose one for you that will be best for them and their profits. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Brenda. Anyway, any other questions? We'll stick around. If you don't want to talk about your situation in front of everybody, I totally get it. But I'm hoping that you guys leave here with, at least a plan of attack on this stuff. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thank you, and yeah, I appreciate all feedback. I know they're going to send you those surveys or whatever. Cool.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah. Everybody got a book, right?
I have more deals.